Great. Hello. Good evening, everyone. Well, it's good evening from my time. It is 8:01 p.m. Eastern Time. Today is Thursday, 6th July, 2023. Welcome to Filecoin Core Devs number 59. We have quite a number of things to discuss today. We will do a bit of a switch of things before we continue. Whilst we're in the process of the meeting. So welcome again. We have Will talking to us about the idea and definition of retrievability. And then he'll also be speaking on FRC, the Peace Gateway. And then we will talk about our Watermelon upgrade, NV21. And then the Filecoin Master Plan and Community Engagement by Fatman and Stephen Lee. And then we take questions and answers afterwards. Just to confirm that there are no more people in the waiting room. Okay. All right, without further ado, just a few housekeeping. We have just 1 hour together. Let's keep our conversations tailored to, the subject matters we have now. Feel more than, free to take the conversations async, especially where we cannot get through them all today. But hopefully we have a fruitful discussion today. And I'll hand that over to Will.
Thanks, Lucky. So I've got a couple related things to talk about, all in the general scope of retrievability. This first one is really a somewhat of like a position piece or an argumentation that we do need to be thinking with a little bit more nuance, and that we can't sort of avoid retrievability. There's a whole lot of data out there, and when we think about sort of the original use cases of Filecoin, some availability of data is just like a core part. It's right, like we have to both store and then get back access to data to make that data useful. And that goes through many of the layers that we have pretty deep in terms of the things that we want to enable with Filecoin. If we're going to extend deals, we need to be able to get the data from SPs. So all of that stuff about data DAOs in FVM, things like that, that's all conditioned on having some expectation of, even sort of archival or offline data needs some way to eventually get back off. And then if you're storing stuff as a client, just as a basic thing, you want to be able to get back that data that you've stored. I think one of the main things we've missed so far that makes this hard is that we generally are talking about retrieval as a, retrieval should succeed or whatever. And we're not thinking like the economics of retrieval end up being a little bit different, which is the bandwidth and operations have real costs, and different data is going to have different costs on that retrieval side. So it's not a one size fits all problem. And it's not something that we can just lump in and say, oh, you need to make this retrievable, because what that means when we talk about retrievability needs to have another layer of nuance if we're going to partition that and make that a proposition that is attractive to SPs, that they can actually like live up to what they're agreeing to and know what it is that they're agreeing to. Because if you unknowingly store something that turns out to be very popular, the cost to you, if you just say, oh, you need to keep it available, is potentially unbounded, and that doesn't work, right? So we need this sort of thing of, okay, what does it mean when we say it's available? Does that mean that you've dedicated a gigabit connection? Like what is it you're actually saying in terms of the cost that you're expected to have and the sort of service level that you're expecting to sign up for? And right now, all of that is negotiated through external contracts. It's not something that we can express in a deal, and it's not something that Filecoin is helping us with. And so that leads to sort of small pools. So yeah, you can move on to this middle one. There's a couple things that we're going to work on that I'm, I think, pushing on to try and get some of this nuance into the conversation. The first that you can expect is that in the coming months, we'll start trying to talk about retrieval tiers. We think this eventually is something that really belongs with a deal, is what is the expectation of retrievability that this data has at the point that that deal is being made. So is this deal that's expected to be available for online retrieval for anyone? or is this archival data? Like if we don't know that, we can't know if the data is living up to the expectations of the client. And we don't have any of that differentiation right now. So there's some efforts that Phil Plus is trying to do through notaries and so forth. But I think it's really limited in the nuance it can have by not having that as a thing that the network knows. And so having that expectation of what's expected there, we have one bit right now, which is fast retrieval, which is that expectation that there's an unsealed copy available. But that's really not actually signing up for, well, how much bandwidth are we expecting the SP is providing and making available for this data? And so we need some more nuance to get out of this unlimited, unbounded like downside to SPs. The second one is to start thinking and keep moving forward on incentives, which is SPs need to be remunerated for the cost that they're incurring for retrieval. I think initially we can expect this to be experimenting with level 2 type solutions. So we can imagine contracts that can release collateral. There's been experiments with retrieve.org and others around how do you, pay back the cost of retrieval and make it incentivized for someone to provide retrieval. But eventually we think that this is a thing where, in the way that Phil Plus is already, a reward multiplier of the network providing an incentive for things that benefit the network. Having public data sets that then amplify the network's presence and visibility are also things that are important for the network. And so we think that living up to these expectations of retrievability that a client is expecting is part of what would be expected in order to get that. So initially, this is something where we want to think about it as what works, make sure we've got something that's solid, that's meets expectations in terms of the rewards you're getting correlate to you actually doing the retrievability. And once everyone's like agreed that we've got a system that works, then we can think about how does the network subsidize this. So that's sort of like the two tiers there that you can expect that when we think about actually incentivizing this, a lot of the work is going to be enable experimenting with that at a higher level and gaining confidence before we push for protocol changes directly for incentives. Okay, so let me talk about the more concrete thing that's happening right now. So on the next slide, there is an FRC up for discussion. This is, I think, 709. And this is talking about what does it mean to have HTTP retrieval as a provider of data. This is there's an effort in the Phil Plus community to specify this. We think that there are sort of 3 parts that form that. One is making the content of the deals available on IPNI for indexing, and so that the network can learn what's in the deals so that they can ask for retrievals. There's an IPNI spec describing what that protocol looks like that you provide. There's another one which is around providing partial retrievals and the data in the retrievals. There is a gateway spec that ipfs has that looks like that, that describes what the semantics of providing individual blocks of data out of a deal that gets made look like. But then there's this third one that we've actually been using as probably our primary form of retrieval, and we haven't specified that anywhere. And so what this is okay, you've got a piece of data, right? Like you send it right now. Many deals that are online deals are getting made over HTTP, and it's a 32 gig or 64 gigs piece that's getting sent over HTTP. And we have also a gateway endpoint for getting that same piece back as a whole, just HTTP piece of what that car file is. And that's getting used for things like Evergreen and other places where we pull the data back. And it's not a particularly complicated spec. You ask for /piece/piecessid, and that is an HTTP request that gets you back that object of the piece data. This is specifying what those semantics are so that we have a clear definition and intercompatibility between different implementations of markets for what we expect when we ask for a piece of data back so that we can replicate it. Welcome continued discussion there. I think the main discussion we've had so far is that we may want to have this endpoint support retrieval of both the piece that was sent, but also of the sealed instance of that piece, so that you can ask for a COM-R to get back the sealed data. This would enable cases for unsealing to be offloaded, unsealing as a service type things, where instead of paying an SP to unseal, you could have a market there for the unsealing. But also, right, like if there is space dedicated to those sealed pieces, that should be available. Then you should check that there actually is this, unique sealed copy of the data available if you really need to. So that's been added in the subsequent iteration of the conversation around what the specification looks like. But any other discussion there, I welcome. I think that's what I've got for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Will. Do we have questions or comments? Yes, Jennifer.
Can you elaborate more why the Peace Gateway enables unsealing as a service? Because we are not storing or broadcasting this CID of sealed copy, right? Like the sealed data. So like, can you elaborate more?
So the discussion that has happened in the current draft would say that you can ask for /piece/com_r, which is the commitment of that sealed replica, and that would give you the sealed piece data.
Yeah, sorry, I missed the .com_r part. Sorry. Yeah.
Any additional questions or comments? All right.
If we can, actually, I have one.
Go ahead.
You can go to like the first or the second slide really quick.
Okay, let's see.
Oh, here. So I think we briefly discussed about this like offline ones, but like I am kind of really interested in if there's any progress on the incentive side of the things, because I know you will consider smart contract solutions, but also maybe fit into, protocol rewards, just to make sure that retrievability either is incentivized or is guaranteed. Any thoughts you can share with us right now, or it's too soon to talk?
I still am very much of the opinion that the sort of the North Star of where we eventually want to be is that retrievability should be a thing that we can subsidize with Filecoin block rewards, right? Like that is the public goods sort of subsidy of how we're, saying we want the network to grow. And I think one of the things we would want the network to support is that data is retrievable, because that enables a bunch of use cases and leads to a ultimately longer term successful network.
Agreed.
So I think we need to get there. And then the question is what is the path to feel comfortable that we're not, that there's no foot guns, that we're not doing something mistaken in getting there, and that we've got something that actually is reflecting what we want to be incentivizing, right? Like that's always the trick. So I think we want to make sure we've got incentives that are incentivizing the right thing. We can do all of that experimentation through contracts and at a level too. And then once we are convinced that we actually are incentivizing the right thing, that's when it's the right time that we push more strongly for saying now the network should subsidize this thing that is valuable to the network.
I totally agree with that. I feel like it will be an interesting discussion on whether that should be additional incentive other than what we already have in the storage incentive today. Because like for me, like a storage service should guarantee retrievability by itself. So when a thing is incentivized storage, I feel like retrieval should comes with it. So I think it's going to be very interesting whether we're leveraging the existing system or we're going to be having a new thing. Stephen also has a hand.
Yes, Stephen. After Stephen, then we have Scott.
Okay, thank you. I think the retrievability is very important, but I don't think we have a very good way to do this right now, because we don't have proof of retrievability or the proof of the data transmission where graphic way to do this. This is one thing I want to mention. And also I agree that the retrievability or the storage provider who provide the retrieval service will involve some cost about for example the bandwidth and also the storage and maintenance original copy. So I think that if we have a platform or application which, if the client actually can pay the fee which could cover the cost and also make the storage provider have some benefits. So I don't think there will be one issue. We just need to encourage the community to develop some kind of service to do this. So the key thing is that the real requirement, okay, and also the cost. So to compare the benefit over the cost. So I think this is the key. And I fully agree that we need to have some incentives. Because it's a Web3 platform or application, we could have incentives to initiate this kind of thing. For example, we could issue some layer 2 token to really eliminate the community to join this. But I don't think if we use, I'm not so sure, if this can be integrated into Filecoin Plus, because Filecoin Plus is using the native token, the Filecoin, to incentive the real data storage. That is, for the retrievability, that will be a problem, because we do not have a way, as I mentioned, we don't have a decentralized cryptographic way to prove this. So you cannot use that. But on layer 2, that will be very, very easy, right? You could issue your token to do this, and you even can do something like a centralized way to develop on some stage, and then to have some more development and slowly to go to the decentralized way. So that's my
so definitely do look. I think we're basically in agreement. Do watch what we come out with. We'll have more of a roadmap soon, and I think you are already just starting to see parts of it in, for instance, the Phil Plus notary world today, where validation bots are expressing what retrievability they've observed on each new client application against the data that's being provided there. So there are starting to be validation bots that are monitoring and tracking the retrievability of Phil Plus data. And so you can imagine that becoming first at a smart contract where that becomes on-chain, and then eventually becomes a decentralized view into retrievability. There's a bunch of gaming stuff and making sure that that's really a trustworthy thing. But I think what you'll see is that as it happens into a contract layer, that looks a lot like this secondary token layer that you're describing. And then once we really trust that, we can think about what the integration looks like into the native token.
Yes, Scott, before you proceed, Jennifer is also asking where we can follow your work, just so that we can keep in touch. Maybe you can share more about that in the chat box. Deep, I can see your hand is up. I'll give you 2 minutes if you can quickly run through.
I will say Scott's hand was up before mine.
Yes, after him.
Hey, thanks. I will keep it brief. Just a quick question here, because I think Stephen touched a lot on it, like needing a second token for retrievability. I'm going to leave that foxhole kind of alone. When it comes to the tiering, is the idea that like these retrieval bots are timing it and then we trust them to like enforce the tiers? Cryptographically, it can be very difficult to prove that you got it at the right speed. And so do we expect that complexity to go into consensus, or is this just trust that we're putting in these retrieval bots? It's just some clarity there. I know you guys have it all figured out. Just directionally where your thoughts are headed would be great to hear.
So I think there's a few different things, and there's a lot of complexity here, and so that's what's getting worked through, right? Is what's actually something that we think has real ability to be difficult to game. So there's baselines when you look at like what retrieve.org has already experimented with, where you nominate a set of sort of neutral third parties that could potentially check on violation claims. So if someone says, I can't retrieve it, you send it to some neutral auditors to attempt to retrieve it in lieu of that. I think what we're really expecting is a couple things with what these tiers give us. One is there's a set of deals and data that are ACL, where it's not like the thought is some random person can't get them because the client doesn't want that to have happen. And so in that case, what does retrievability mean? It means the client gets that data back when they want it, right? Like because they're the only ones who are supposed to get it. And so you end up having to say, well, did the client actually get the service they wanted? And so that's in some ways a much riskier thing for an SP to take, because if the SP or if the client that you've said then gets mad at you and says they can claim, and so you don't have that sort of backup assurance of like, well, but I'm doing it. And so figuring out, does the SP want to take it only with the assurance that there are some agreed upon neutral third parties where it's good enough for them to send it to those neutral third parties to meet a claim that they are making that content available. So figuring out what those sort of dispute on retrieval processes look like is more than just did you meet your bandwidth, but it's also making sure that we've got sort of a clear protocol in place for this. I think for what that validation looks like, to return to, I think, closer to your original question. Yeah. Right now, what we have is something that looks in some ways like a DRAND-like network, where it's a federation of a set of partners that are running validation bots. And they will, I think, with tiers, be able to more regularly attempt data that should be available, as public data sets versus these like archival data sets, right? Where you might only have the piece gateway exposed and not, partial data. I think longer term, we expect to be able to supplement or have parts of that also done with things like Station or Saturn, where there's large decentralized networks that are actually either because they're just doing this as part of their business or otherwise are attempting retrieval and reporting whether it works or not. And their schedules will also then be modulated based on the tiering.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. Yeah, I guess the last comment is I can see where, like, if you do have this second token layer, that retrievability could be, somebody who is storing the data, claiming that they've stored the data on this chain, and then the consensus power for that chain then actually comes from, let's say, other nodes downloading the data and verifying that it's retrievable, and that's what produces finalization or something along those lines. And so things like speed and some of those other things don't come into play. And then the economic forces of me producing a good SP to store this data is going to make others' ability to validate it better. And then you can actually get trustless there. So definitely interested in retrievability and how we bake that into consensus. And I like where Stephen went with that. You may need a second token. So super interested in this. Thanks for sharing.
Great, thanks. Deep, over to you.
Okay, I will actually try to keep this short too. I just want to flag for people that are following along the discussion and also interested in seeing what we're doing on the Phil+ side. I generally agree directionally with all of this. Same page as most of the thoughts being shared. We're working with Will on some of these things and are philosophically aligned in terms of like the direction this is going in, and are interested in seeing an ability to trustlessly verify or at scale verify retrievability of content. From a Phil+ standpoint, where we are is it's a little bit trickier to make those kinds of objective statements today. So yes, we've got retrieval testing. We're interested in seeing more sources of data come in for retrieval testing so we can build as unbiased a view as possible. It's not a different problem than like the reputation problem generally in the scope that it exists today. And so we've got some reasonable like short-term direction that we have confidence in. But I do want to call out that there's a distinct difference between like the testing that we're doing right now in the Phil+ land and how retrieval testing should go at scale, in that there's a de-scoping or a reduction in scope to just care about open data stored on the network. And it's easier to scope it that way because theoretically open data stored on the network was stored as a public benefit or a public good. And therefore you can reasonably say that like anybody in the world should have access to that data. And so then simulating a request on that behalf tends to be a much more trivial problem in terms of whether or not the needs are being met and network subsidies being applied in a useful way to get open data stored on the network. However, open data constitutes a very small percent of the data in the world. And so I think figuring out ways in which we can actually simulate client behavior and get data from clients that are actually needing the data and should be getting to the data, like with integrations on the gateway side or Saturn and stuff, I think will be a much more useful direction longer term. and relying less on data sampling and testing and more on real world results will probably yield better upside.
Thanks, Deep. Jennifer, I see your hand up. Can I give you 15 seconds?
Yes, Deep basically covered most of it. So like it's related to that. I feel like it's worth calling out when you design this. Think about like whether it's fair to punish people who are not enabling retrievability, like existing storage provider who are not serving retrievability because it was not expectation, right? So like we need to be careful with the design there to make sure we don't create unfairness.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Will. Thank you so much, everyone, for contributing to the discussions. Very briefly from us, finally, we're excited. NV21 is coming along, and that is called the Watermelon Upgrade. And we're beginning to think about how that would look for all of us. And there are a couple of open questions, obviously, that we need to, debate or decide today so that we can move forward. One of which is, talking about synthetic POREP, which I believe is FIP 59, asking if it's sufficient to warrant an upgrade at this moment, based on our preferences or, or other constraints that we have. And then, if we're anticipating to have 2 more upgrades this year, then we need to make that decision quick enough and move along in the coming weeks. Caitlin, I see your hand up. Do you want to continue the discussion?
Yeah, sure.
Great.
Thanks, Lucky. So from my perspective, I don't know if we have to hard agree that this is what we want to do and the direction we're going, but I think we need to move the conversation along. For 6 to 8 weeks now, we've been talking around NV21, and as Lucky pointed out, there's this conversation about whether synthetic POREP, as well as a few other smaller FIPs, are significant enough to justify the cost of upgrading. On the governance side, we don't have a strong opinion. Our only preference is being very careful about which FIPs we consider for inclusion, and the 3 that we have now are already accepted, so this works really well for us. I know Jennifer, you and also you raised some concerns around having to shift priorities away from other Lotus development activities towards another upgrade. My perspective, for what it's worth, is that we have typically done sort of a late summer upgrade so that we have room for 1 more at the end of the year. And if that is sort of the schedule of upgrades that we're looking at, it's time for us to sort of commit to a mainnet upgrade date so that we can begin to organize resources. But wanted to move this into this meeting to provide a little bit of clarity, have this discussion, and also hopefully if we leave this meeting with a few unresolved questions still, that we can move through those in the next week or 2 so that we can begin to make some progress in this direction. Looks like there are a lot of comments.
Great, thanks. I don't think the comments are for, oh yeah. Oops, I'm not updated. Are there comments? Anyone willing to share immediate thoughts or concerns?
Yeah, okay, I'm not saying we should not do an upgrade anytime soon, but I do want to push back on one thing you said is like, we have expectation on we should have a summer upgrade, whatever, but like I still think shipping a network upgrade costs a lot of resources. You coordinate one upgrade now, you know how much effort it puts into that. So I strongly push back on anything that says shipping for the sake of shipping. I think we should only conduct a network upgrade when the ecosystem and when the community, when the network needs it, instead of just like for the sake of doing it. That's why I feel like the scope conversation is very interesting, and I would love to hear what other core devs thinks about the current NV21 scope.
Yes, Ayush.
Yeah, hey, sorry, I'm outside, so maybe some background noise. Unsurprisingly, I agree with almost everything Jennifer said. In particular, yeah, I think network upgrades have to be warranted, and I do think warranted because of there's major improvements we're delivering or something critical that the network needs. Most of the FIPs, I personally feel the FIPs in that we have in NV21 so far do not make me especially motivated to have an upgrade sooner rather than later. And my understanding is none of them are urgently needed by the community. There is one thing that I think could motivate a sooner upgrade rather than later, which is we do have some protocol bug fixes that we're excited to get out there. Some of these were originally scoped for NV19, but descoped due to the expedited timeline. Others are new protocol bug fixes that we've discovered, and the fixes are all ready. We just have to ship them. So I'm more sympathetic to an argument along those lines, and I'm interested in having that conversation. But otherwise, yeah, I'm not jonesing to get this upgrade out.
Interesting. Caitlin.
Yeah, I hear you. I think this all makes sense. I do want to say, since he was not able to join this call today, I have also been asked to represent Nemo's perspective. He obviously worked and was an author on the synthetic POREP FIP. It was his perspective that this provides a significantly better way of doing business than the current POREP structure does. And that because right now this is slated to be a very small upgrade, that shipping it as part of a few other smaller FIPs lessens the actual risk for this upgrade. It will also allow for storage providers to use less disk space overall, which is a benefit if they choose to upgrade. And that it's a preference given that if we only have one more upgrade at the end of the year, there will likely be a push to get a lot of other FIPs into it. And it may be more difficult then to also include synthetic POREP. Something to consider.
Thanks. We can take Jennifer, then Stephen and Scott.
My question will be very well roll over to Stephen in the end. So I'm glad he is the next one has the hand. And so I do want to elaborate on the protocol bugs Ayush has mentioned, just because he is like, not at his desk. So there are a couple bugs that there are a couple things from NV19 postponed. The first one is the snap deal activation bug, which we are overriding the activation epoch for sector runway, and that can let people to create a sector has 10-year maximum lifetime if they do the snap deal when the 5-year maximum sector lifetime, when they extend the sector or snap the sector upon the end of the existing sector. We should fix this, but we do have until 2024 February to fix this. I'm not saying we should wait until then. Once we get a chance, we should fix it. So that's one of the protocol bugs. There's another one that we are looking internally, but like that one has a timeline risk because we will have to come up with some FIP. So according to the FIP process, the current proposed timeline likely won't work already. So Caitlin, I probably should sync with you offline sometime soon as well. We also have another FIP that's accepted and should be finalized in the last upgrade, which is extending the deal sector maximum lifetime, sector commitment lifetime, and the deal maximum lifetime to 3.5 years, which I know is a thing that could be really nice for people to have longer deals slowly. So that is another thing that's pending in the pipeline. We are also doing a lot of optimization. Thanks Alex and Alex Xu, they have been optimizing the deal activation costs a lot, which are introduced by FIP 45. We increased the cost there. We are optimizing it. So it will be really, really, really nice to get those optimizations shipped as well. But I do also want to call out people, storage provider can actually get a cheaper cost if they just simply use proof commit right now instead of using proof commit aggregation, because nothing can be cheaper than free, and proof commit right now is free when it comes to deal activation. So it's arguable if that motivates a network upgrade, but it's available. So I am actually curious about how Venus feel about the scope of this upgrade, what's on your roadmap, and if you think it's worth us spending the time to ship a network upgrade with this scope, or you have other things on your roadmap that you would love to prioritize.
Yeah, I think it's hard to say. So yeah, for me, yeah, for the upgrading the network new version, I think I mentioned this before. I really like we have a fixed path, which means the pace. I mean, okay. I mean, yeah, for example, every new version 1 quarter, that will be good for the for the community to follow, right, and to plan ahead for this kind of upgrading. But right now, it's very hard for us to do this. Because we tried this, but I don't think we really could follow this. But anyway, I still prefer that we have more upgrading event, especially at the current stage, because we have many protocol changes here, and some improvement. So for the I would support that we'll have NV21, the network to be upgraded in this quarter. That's what will be good. So we will try anything we could put it in. For example, some bug fix, just as Jennifer mentioned, because we know that we have something we need to do anyway. Okay, not right now, maybe later on. So but anyway, what we could have done, and we put it in. So it will also mitigate the risk for the next upgrade, because we have done something, right? This is one thing I want to mention. So about the details, Jennifer mentioned. So I don't think there is any problem for Venus to follow all of this. There are a few bugs actually. I think we should fix them as soon as possible. This is the thing I want to mention, and I have one question actually here. Because while we are thinking about the next upgrade, and we still thinking about the long-term involvement. So the question is, what's the status of the native FVM development? What's that plan? So anybody can update that?
I'm not sure.
Sorry, Stephen, could you ask the last question again?
The native FVM feature. So we launched FVM. We just launched FEVM, right? In March. So I think our next very important upgrade is the native FVM support, which support WASM. And you could actually to write contract in for example in Rust or in some other language.
I think this is a very, very good question. And Stephen, if you are here, you probably should talk about it. Are you?
Yes. So native FVM is going to be actually probably a few upgrades away. Basically, because we need a couple upgrades to harden the runtime so that users can securely deploy custom native contracts. It's probably not going to be this year, looking at our current roadmap. We're hoping early next year, but we're still figuring it out.
I would actually pass the question back to Stephen. Why do you think native FVM should be prioritized? Why is it so important? What kind of use cases and product features are you looking forward to get enabled with it? I feel like FVM team has been looking for feedback on that. So if you
so the first thing is that because the native FVM is in our schedule before, right? And we think and the whole community think that is a big thing. Okay, so we didn't hear the update for some time. I think the community needs some update on that. So this is the first thing. And this second thing is that we know we also expect the native FVM will really help us to write some contract which could be more efficient. Okay, because FEVM, you know that you have to interpret it into the EVM and then go to the native WhatsApp, right? So the gas cost will be higher.
Thanks, Stephen. Scott, over to you.
Step was saying something, but he was muted.
Sorry.
Oh.
The gas cost of native would probably be better. It's a bit tricky because it might not be as good as the current native contracts for security reasons, unfortunately, because for now we have to assume the current contracts are not malicious. But with arbitrary native contracts, we might have to charge more gas for certain operators because we have to be pessimistic. So it's not quite clear what the exact performance would be. Truly, like high performance would require more parallelism, which is also something on the roadmap, but that gets more complicated.
Thanks, Deb. Finally, Scott, take it away.
Thanks. So I guess just back onto the MV21 conversation, I guess one additional kind of light, which has been covered to some degree, is like, I agree that this, if you look at kind of how big the FEM upgrade was and like how critical NV19 was, that, NV21 would be kind of in a class of its own, compared to those two. So, inside of it is not something that is necessarily super urgent or, super big and transformative. And so then you kind of say why. So if you play it forward a little bit and you skip this one, then, the NV21 that rolls around in October or November will be the most meaningful shipping vehicle that you have all year outside of FEM. You still have all the holdovers that we cut out of NV19 to reduce the risk there. And then things like synthetic POREP kind of lose the window of opportunity to be considered carefully and done right and well, because that October, November release is going to be much bigger because we haven't shipped a bunch of stuff all year. And so there's going to be, we skip this one, all focus is going to be on the November release, and we're going to cram it. You're going to have bugs. We're going to cut corners potentially. And then, Stephen talked about, native actors early 2024. So we're going to turn around and do a native actors upgrade 3-4 months later. What about that February bug? February 2024 is when this thing needs to be fixed. That means we're doing it now or we're doing it in November. And so then we take a problem that we have time on and less urgency and breathing room, and we turn it into something that must ship in November or with, native actors. And so we put ourselves in a tough situation of, we have no other option by not releasing this stuff. So working backwards from that, and we can, and so should we, it's a good conversation to have within that context of where things might be 6 to 8 months from now. It seems like unless we're going to tie ourselves to the mast on it, that we should ship what we have because we have a good opportunity and a good window to do it.
Interesting. Thanks for that input. Ayush, I'm not sure if that's an old hand up or anyone.
It is an old hand up, sorry.
Okay. Caitlin, do you have like immediate responses or we can just, go ahead.
No,
Okay.
I am inclined to agree more with Scott, but Jennifer is the one who is planning resources for the Lotus team. We always run into this problem with difficult upgrades of there not being like a surefire way to say yes or no one way or the other. I think this conversation has moved the needle quite a bit. That is all I have to say.
Great. Thanks. Obviously, the conversation continues. I've dropped the link to where we have that, the discussion on NV21. Continue to drop your thoughts. Ayush, is that another hand?
Yes. Can I be heard well? Sorry, I am in a car.
Yes.
Okay, good. I just wanted to say one thing that it's not really going to help drive us to decision here, but I do think one of the reasons why, say, Jennifer and I are a little reluctant to kind of jump on board here is just because of the amount of work that network upgrades require from the Lotus and built-in actors and FEM teams, as well as just the broader community. One avenue that we really should be exploring more, and that there is some preliminary work going on that maybe we can share in the next core devs meeting, is how to make it easier, how to make network upgrades easier, how to make them less painful, how to make them safer, and just generally how to reduce the overhead. Because right now, at least speaking as someone on the Lotus team, the overhead feels like a lot. And so that might be something really worth pursuing, even though it is very much a longer term investment. You know, it's not necessarily transformative, but I think this conversation at least is likely delivering some impetus for why that's an important optimization to pursue. And I know that's something that's kind of on the horizon for the FVM and interplanetary consensus teams. So just something to think about, and a takeaway that I'll have from this meeting.
And Casey, it's also not just Lotus decision, because like as Venus, Lotus is always open to support whatever the network needs. I think the pushback here is, again, you coordinate the last network upgrade, so you have better understanding now. It's not just the implementation team has to put into the effort, but also thinking about the ecosystem impact, API service provider, exchanges, all the users, all the storage providers, all the node operators has to updating and supporting testing in this process. So it's not just a development work, but it's also like, you know, user impact as well. And that's why I think we should think a little bit harder when it comes to like what to ship and how often to ship. But again, if we can make the process easier for all the node operators to do upgrades, that would be amazing. But I think there are things coming in the future that can enable us that just doesn't exist today.
Totally. Also, sorry, it was too colloquial. I was using Lotus sort of as shorthand for the fact that you are kind of representing that opinion. We can also sync and discuss what other timelines through the rest of the year might look like for 1 or 2 upgrades. But what it's sounding like to me is where we're at is that there's not really a bunch of impetus to move forward immediately with planning for NV21. And so we can continue to have this conversation over time. We can sync privately and then reflect those any decisions or ideas publicly in the GitHub forum. And for now, that is the decision, that there's not going to be a big rush to move forward with MV21. Does that sound correct?
Well, I guess the question that I then have is how does this decision-making process then drive what's included when NV21 actually does occur? Right, because like based on kind of what I said, assuming that anything
Right.
if it has a basis in reality,
Right.
we're signing up for some shark level migrations in November.
Yeah, so it's like, I'm gonna take a first step on that question. So like, if you remember, Kingsley, like in the past, we have a fit consideration like deadline for network upgrade. I feel like this is what we can do to help us form the decision. So basically, at certain time, only the FIP already have a proposal in a considerable draft state will be considered in NV21, and we can take, Cordex can take a starting point from there to finalize the scope of the upgrade and then commit to a timeline and to upgrade. So that can help us preventing continuously, slipping the timeline, expanding the scope, and all those things. Wondering if you agree.
Totally. But this again puts us into the place where we're sort of collapsing the governance process and the network upgrade process into one another, which is not always best. And it is what we have done sort of as a stopgap measure, particularly when it was you and I coordinating all components of the upgrade. There are also a few other kind of tricky governance dependencies right now that I think we can also talk about offline that make that a little bit harder. I think the best thing to do also, I think we only have 10 minutes left. And we're getting into that territory of sort of discussing these big trade-offs that as core devs, we've always kind of had to negotiate and haven't had a really great policy for moving forward on them. We will need to continue, I think, outside of this meeting, but should make sure that the conversation we have is also accessible publicly, just async.
Thanks. With that, we are moving quickly to Fatman and Stephen Lee on core input core problems. Over to you. I'm not sure who will be presenting today.
Hello. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Oh, cool. So, hello everyone. I am Fatman13. It is a pleasure to be invited by Lucky to give core devs a quick overview of the proposed FIP discussion 725 Filecoin protocol master plan. What being proposed is not final, and we would very much appreciate community input on the discussion. So before we dive into what the protocol master plan is, let's see some of the problems it tries to address. One of the recurring problems we see throughout the past is that FIP governance is not quite able to have a community to reach soft consensus on drastic protocol changes. Changes like FIP 36, FIP 55. It is very hard to set up definitive process on how we can reach consensus to understand which group should or should not weigh in on the decisions or increase governance engagement in general. Then we have the problem of slow protocol iteration, stalling innovations on user-defined DeFi and storage solution. Many DeFi solutions have to incorporate CeFi elements due to limitation of protocol, and user-defined storage market is being outcompeted by the network built-in subsidies. So lastly, we have the problem of FIPing with no clear strategic goals, a lack of priorities and principles to guide which FIP should be discussed and implemented next. Next slide, please. So we think the solution to aforementioned problem is a layered approach to protocol architecture design, using an application stack and analogy to support generic applications to be run in computers. The OS layers focuses solely on managing process, expose hardware resource, facilitate communication between apps, etc. So by defining clear layers and roles of each layer within the protocol architecture, we think Filecoin network as a whole would then able to evolve into its next stage. Next slide, please. The layer approach is only doable after FEVM launch in March 2023. For the longest time since mainnet launch, Filecoin protocol itself is the product for data storage. So it has to couple with all kinds of complexity a storage product requires. So however, now we have the option to clean up the core protocol layer and push the storage product to layer 2, so that Filecoin core protocol can actually transition to a platform, just like the OS layer in the previous slide. Next slide, please. Many of the details in the proposal will be omitted due to the time constraints, but what we like to stress again is that on the left, before FEVM, Filecoin protocol itself is the storage product, and everything is tightly coupled. Like an old Chinese saying, 牵一发动全身, which means pulling one hair is affecting the whole body. So on the right, the core protocol layer like rewards minor consensus, proof of storage are completely separated from user layer, where the products and application are actually built. So the layer division effectively makes Filecoin core protocol as a platform. As in the title of this slide, the proposed protocol master plan transforms Filecoin from a product to a platform. Next slide, please. So finally, let's see how some of the problems presented at the beginning could be resolved by this proposal. So first, we will be having a scoped down core protocol, which in turn allows FIP governance to reach soft consensus much faster. For example, the core concepts proposed in FIP 56 would actually bypass FIP governance to define whatever multiplier they see fit in the user and user/application layer. And then we will have, and secondly, we will have genuine competitions among storage markets for SP storage, and storage markets that could potentially evolve on their own without waiting for core protocol change to bring new innovation to the network. So lastly, we can establish priorities and strategic goals to realize the protocol master plan FIP by FIP to meaningfully take the network to next stage. So that is all. Thank you for listening. Looking forward to some of your input in the FIP discussion 725. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the high-level overview. Being that we have just about 2 minutes to go, I can just take one comment. Otherwise, we can all, make our input and weigh in the FIP discussion thread on GitHub. Otherwise, we all can go there and make our comments, but I'll just give one opportunity for one comment. No. Caitlin?
Oh,
No.
no.
I thought you were muted. Okay.
I mean, this is a huge proposal, which is why I think it's awesome that Fatman could come and introduce it to everyone. I'm going to grab the link real quick if anyone wants to read it in greater detail and provide some comments. Something like this is something that has to marinate with folks for a really long time and is very incremental. So
Great. Thank you all so much for joining us for this very interesting Core Devs call number 59. I'm looking forward to seeing you all at Core Devs number 60 next month. Do not forget to join us for the next governance call, which is usually happens every last Friday of the month. Do register there and join our PhilGov Slack channel to ask all your questions and join, other discussions happening. Jennifer, yes.
You have an ad hoc, maybe 30 minutes additional call just for aligning NV21 because it's impacting how we prioritize our team and allocate our resources a lot. Yeah. We should definitely be in touch async to have that conversation and then move all of it publicly so everyone else can join the conversation. Thank you all so much for joining. Have a lovely rest of the day. Bye.